Hi, this is Alex Kister, and this will be my director's commentary of the Mandela Catalogue episode called Exhibition. So this video was made in kind of a weird time in my life, very big turning point in my personal life and my personal relationship with the series and it becoming kind of the main focus of my life. So what happened after Intruder Alert is I went to college. It was my first year as a freshman, and I ended up staying there for a whole 2 months or so. Realized very quickly that it wasn't for me. This was still very early on in the series, so Volume 1 hasn't blown up to its fullest extent yet at that point, but it was kind of beginning to. And the only video I made while I was there in my dorm room was Metaphysical Awareness Disorder, which I've rebranded since then. But that was just a short little, very easy thing that I didn't feel like was worth an entire commentary video about. So during these 2.5 months or so, my time has been taken so much away from the Mandela Catalogue and more on my schoolwork and marching band and stuff. But I ended up leaving, and I realized that there could be a chance that I could focus on YouTube as my main thing. So I went home, and the first thing I did was Exhibition, which actually I was just very lucky that I came across. I'm very grateful that I came across that idea, because when I was in my dorm and trying to brainstorm new ideas, there were so many other directions that the series could have gone in that I'm very happy that I didn't choose, that I don't think I'll ever really talk about because it's just kind of embarrassing and stupid, but I'm very happy that it went the way that it did, where I really delved deeper into the alternates themselves, because it was about to go in a direction that didn't even involve the alternates really much. And it was going to go into some really bizarre world building stuff, but I kind of wanted to, ground myself again. And I wanted to really hone in on what I really liked about Intruder Alert, which was that concept of having these kind of separate pieces all in this single video, like a puzzle, whereas before I had these separate videos that were all kind of standard on their own as their own medium, but I like the idea of having an entire YouTube video be its own project, but it still had that mixed media aspect, and I wanted to go even deeper into that, give Gabriel a little more lore and his relationship with Mark and what happened with Mark before he died. I thought that was pretty interesting at the time. So the way that started off was kind of this, before the first Beginner's Bible segment, was this kind of black screen and then the soundscape of this just increasing collection of sounds that have happened, like callbacks to the series from the videos that have come out. And the inspiration from that was actually the Pink Floyd song Speak to Me, which is the intro to The Dark Side of the Moon. There's actually a ton of Pink Floyd influence in the series, believe it or not, especially from the movie The Wall, which really came into play with Volume 3 and 4 and 5, but we'll all be getting to that later. But then came the first Beginner's Bible segment, which I thought was pretty cool, and this was probably my favorite use of using that cartoon. I feel like it was just a little more subtle this time, and it was the first time that I wanted to use that motif of all the color being drained from the world upon something sinister arriving. And I wanted to kind of continue this overall kind of theme that the Mandela Catalogue is, in its name, a collection of tapes and evidence and just whatever that the police department has collected about the alternates, which in the lore is just Thatcher. And this was kind of one of the first early points in the series where I was, at the time, I was consuming a lot of other analog horror content and internet stuff, and kind of catching up on the classics in the early YouTube space as well with like Marble Hornets and No Through Road and stuff like that. And I think that something that I wanted to do was really hone in on these characters more, and I knew that I kind of had these two main characters in this space, which was Mark and Thatcher, that I introduced in two separate videos that I never really anticipated to do anything with, but at this point I was like, well, it would be cool if I can kind of connect these two people somehow. And I was thinking, okay, well, this would be kind of cool. Like, Mark is kind of like the guy that kicks off this, and then Thatcher could be the guy who, finds out everything, and everything kind of unravels before him as being the protagonist. And I don't really remember what my influences were for exhibition, but I just really liked this kind of vibe of just these silent, faceless videotapes just scattered across whatever Mark was up to before the events of his death, like maybe thinking, kind of trying to give some clues as to what he was going through religiously in his personal life, and what was going on in his own house, in his own room at that time, and what could have been leading up to the events of him and Caesar's altercation. I was very lucky to be living by this very extremely beautiful, huge church that I remember the night that I did all this recording. I went back a couple times, I remember the first time, especially with the shot where you see the church in the distance. I remember that night I was really sick, so I was up all night. I couldn't go to sleep, and I was thinking, well, I might as well make the most of this, because it was like 4 a.m., so I went on a long drive, and seeing the church lit up in the distance I thought was really cool, even though it's kind of hard to tell that that's what it is based on the quality of the camera because of that VHS effect. I remember for a couple of days after that, I kind of had this fun little tradition where I would get up at like 5:30 or so, and drive over to the church, where I could go on the grounds as early as before the sun even came up, because that's when people would be going there to pray and stuff, even though the services were way later. And I even remember someone who worked there coming up to me and asking kind of how I was doing, and it's just very, very kind, cool people there. And then while I was there in those early morning hours, it was a little unsettling, because I was there pretty much alone. I was the only visitor there that early, and there were some kind of nooks and crannies around there that was just kind of eerie, kind of these empty, dark corners in long hallways, and religious statues that I remember I got a lot of footage of, but I didn't end up using, even though I wish I did, now that I look back. But anyways, these little corners and hallways and weird little sections of the grounds of this place was perfect to convey Mark's kind of paranoia about something kind of coming after him in a way. And to me, I thought that this was kind of cool because, like, of course, it showed in his house, like, this paranoia of something that was going on in his house as well, in his room, of something always just kind of looking for him. But little did he know, like, there was no possible way to physically see this thing that is tormenting him, which I thought was kind of cool, kind of just hopeless way to convey this kind of awful paranoia in someone that's going through such a horrible crisis. And then it all kind of reaches a point where stuff is actually starting to happen to Mark. It's not simply just these insane paranoid recordings anymore. Things actually start happening. And first was this closet door opening, which in reality, I was just able to go into my closet and then open it and then come out, cut it, shine flashlight on it and it looks good as new. And I remember watching when people were making reaction videos to that, people thinking that the reflection of the flash of my camera recording kind of reflected in both of my doorknobs of my front door and the closet door to look like, and it almost looked like two eyes in the dark, which was such an unintentional stroke of luck. Like, I think that was great. I'm glad that people were so freaked out by that, but that was not intentional at all. And then, of course, this leads to Mark going down the basement stairs of this house, which is further expanded upon in Volume 2, so if you know, you know. But then it all comes circling back after his little encounter in the hallway, and then one last shot of the church to kind of wrap that up, as this kind of lingering presence of what is actually haunting Mark this whole time, just kind of in the distance in a kind of metaphorical way. But then it all comes circling back to him in his room again, and none other than the TV turns on, kind of showing the one true way that this horror, beyond his comprehension, can be kind of visualized, to kind of give him one last big haunting in a sense. And I think that is kind of cool because it kind of leads to some speculation on what happened after this and before Volume 1 to Mark. Like, what could have possibly happened to him? How could he have sounded so calm in the phone call? I think that was kind of cool. Just kind of like this mystery that I never intend to answer. Just this kind of cool character building that I personally enjoyed a lot, that I haven't really done a ton of after that, other than maybe in Volume 4, kind of going back to the roots of BPS and those characters. And I do have to kind of mention one of my friends that while I was in college for those 2 months or so, I had this friend who was aware of my work that I've done up to that point. And he, right before I left, I remember he told me that by his dorm building, someone was throwing away a huge, like, CRT TV, and he was like, dude, you should use this in a video or something. I was like, oh my god, that's insane. So I walked all the way to his dorm, and picked up this just perfectly placed, huge, so heavy TV that had its manual and the remote control on top of it. And I was just like, this is just such a insane find. And he helped me kind of carry it over to my dorm, and then I packed it all up to take home, and I was very lucky to be able to use that in this video for the first time. I remember that was a pretty exciting moment, and I had to learn, I had to like get an adapter, look up how to display videos from my laptop onto this old TV, and that ended up being a much bigger thing that I would do down the line, kind of the starting point of this thing that I always did, where I always had these old TVs and videos, which I think is kind of fun. I don't know. But then after that, I thought that it would be kind of a cool moment to reintroduce this alternate again that is starting to appear in that TV, kind of manifesting in real life in this picture that Mark took of it taunting him outside of his window, kind of coming up on the left and then his head kind of dangling down on the right side, which was inspired by the design of the Crooked Man from the Crooked Man game. I actually don't know a single thing about the game. I don't remember. I just remember it being this thing that scared me because I would see it in thumbnails as a kid all the time. I think like when PewDiePie played it or something, and it freaked me out. And I always thought that was so creepy, so I wanted to kind of use that in some degree. But then after that, it kind of just caps off this segment of Mark's tapes being kind of reviewed and stuff, which I thought was kind of a cool way to kind of later segue into Volume 3, with showing, Thatcher actually going into his house and discovering these tapes and evidence and stuff like that. And then after that, it kind of bookends the Beginner's Bible segment just the way that it started, with Noah and the Ark and stuff, and kind of showing it, like building a little more lore with the biblical side of things. And I knew that the way my mindset at this time with this entire video was to kind of avoid that trope, or not trope, but like just try to. I didn't want it to seem like I was trying so hard in this video to make like these scary moments, because in Intruder Alert that was like, there was a lot of, especially like the one scene of like, and in Volume 1, the one obnoxiously in your face scene of, the words telling you to do something. I wanted to kind of do something a little more. I wanted this video to be as mellow as possible and do as much speaking without like just shoving it in your face. And I knew that I tried to do that as best as I could with Mark's tapes, but then also with this scene of Gabriel coming up to Noah, of him just kind of standing in this darkness after the color drains again, which I thought was pretty cool. And him just kind of having this monologue in his little text-to-speech voice. But I wanted to make a point to not have his face kind of do the overthrown thing again, where it contorts, because I just wanted to avoid that kind of thing, because that was something that I remember getting a ton of criticism before. A lot of people didn't like the fact that he just turned into a goofy face. But then also, it's one of those things where people also absolutely loved that, so it's like I didn't know at the time who to listen to. Should I do the more goofy in-your-face stuff, or should I do the more subtle stuff like this? But of course, I mean, I think that the praise that I got for that was way more than the criticism, but especially at that time, since I was new to this whole thing, of course, as usual, the criticism sounds way louder in my head, even though it was much more limited. So I don't know. I ended up, like, I'm looking back on it, this is, I think, easily my favorite video. I think I said that about Intruder Alert also, but I've always felt this way about Exhibition. I loved that video so much, and I feel like it kind of let me know how I wanted to go about the series in the future, especially with Volume 3, which I feel like kind of carried over a lot of those themes of this really subtle horror without being too in your face. I mean, of course, the ending of Volume... I'm not actually going to talk about Volume 3 too much, because I'll probably do a commentary about that, but I liked where this was, and I think that it ended off this kind of Season 1, as at the time, I guess I called this Season 1 in the credits, which is not something that I stayed really consistent with, but my mindset at the time was like, I was going to do this season structure where it would be like, okay, Volume 1 is Season 1, and then all the videos that come after that, and then Volume 2 is Season 2. It's like, I ended up just kind of doing like Acts 1 and 2, so that's just kind of where it ended up going, but yeah. And yeah, I'm very happy with this video. I remember being very happy with it at the time, and I remember when I was actually editing it on Halloween, or yeah, I think it was on Halloween, or whenever Trick or Treat was in my subdivision at the time. And that's just a very fond memory that I have of, since I was this was the last video that I made on my phone. I remember just being in my room in the afternoon, and on my phone in my office chair in the middle of my room, and had my window open, and I could just hear the trick-or-treaters as I was editing this video. And since I was so locked in on my phone, I like finally got up after I was done, and it was like almost dark out, and it was just like that's just a very cherished memory of mine when it comes to this series. That was a very happy time in my life. So that'll kind of wrap up this commentary. This went a little longer than I was expecting, but yeah. What's going to happen with the Volume 2 commentary is, I don't know when I'm uploading this video, but whenever the Volume 2 DVD comes out by Retro Release Video, the commentary for Volume 2 will exclusively be on that DVD in the Special Features section, so check that out. If you want to have your collection. This is the first DVD that we're doing compared to the VHS, because it wouldn't make any sense for Volume 2 to be on a VHS tape, because it wasn't in the analog era. So that would be pretty cool. Check that out if you want. check out the new merch, and let's see, what else do I gotta say? If you follow me on Instagram or anywhere, you're probably already aware because I've been posting some stories about this, but I want to be clear that Volume 6 is on the way. It's getting some really good progress right now. I'm hoping to get Volume 6 out before February, at the very least. Very excited about that video. I'm very excited for you guys to see that. I know that it's kind of taken a while, but kind of the mindset that I've been in recently, with these little mini episodes that I've been doing in between the volumes, is that I think that I might want to start straying away from them a little bit, maybe doing like only one or two after each volume, because I realize that every time I make one of the little mini episodes, it takes away more time that I could be putting into the next volumes, which is why it takes so much longer for me to be doing the volumes. Like, remember, Volume 4 came out in 22, 5 came out in 24, and then 6 is going to come out most likely in 26. So I don't really like the fact that it's taking this long for me to be doing these exponentially. And I think that if I just saved these little mini episodes to just put more time into the volumes, it would be better, because I can just put them in the volumes instead, and it wouldn't really make much of a difference. So, sorry, that was just my little rambling, but yeah, stay very tuned, and thank you so much for sticking around still. I know that things have been kind of slow on my end with the videos, but also my big project, which I should hopefully have some big news about soon. That is also seeing a lot of good progress as well right now. So thanks for sticking around. I'm so grateful for all of you who are watching this. If you stuck around to the end, thank you very much. And yeah, that's all I got. All right, see you later, and next time you'll hear me talk is probably in the Volume 3 commentary. So yeah.